Hi, I'm Chuck Dorsett for Weaver Leathercraft, and we're going to make a beautiful handmade leather briefcase. Can't wait to get started. This is a great project, but a couple points as to what we're doing. All right, first off, we're going to line this for the big reason that if we have a 2 to 3 ounce or 3 to 4 ounce, a lighter weight leather that we love, well, that's just too light for a briefcase. Let's line it. Well, when we do, now we have a durable, solid briefcase and a sturdy, comfortable strap. All right, second part of adding a liner. Well, that speaks for itself. We have 21 beautiful colors of suede. Is that not gorgeous? All right, next big point. We're going to add every element of a briefcase. We're going to go all out here. It's going to take some work, but it's going to be worth it. Right off the bat, I love the straps with the buckles. It's a good look, but it's difficult to get in and out of a briefcase. It's not difficult, it just takes time. So we're going to add some line 20 snaps or line 24 snaps down at the bottom. Quick release, there we go. We've got a hook for our keys, and we've got a pocket for our cell phone, our pens, clips, whatever we want to carry with us. Best part of this design, and if you've ever been through an airport, you'll know exactly what I mean. Right here, we always have boarding passes and parking receipts and restaurant receipts that we've got to tuck quick, we got to get to quick, and we need to know where they are. That's the best part of this briefcase. All right, anything I use in this video, weaverleathercraft.com or check below. We've got links there, going to take you straight to the website. So let's jump on this beautiful project. Big pattern here, in fact, a little too big for a good camera shot with any detail. That's no problem. We've got pics of everything, and we can download those pics or simply pause and draw. Let's start right here, our main body dimensions. Outside dimensions, 38.5 inches by 16 inches width. We've got a 12-inch pocket depth and a 3-inch gusset, okay? Jumping back over. Notice we've got marks here. Now, good pattern maintenance, because I'm marking holes where I need to punch in black, but I'm marking where I simply need to put a mark. I'm going to mark those with red. That way I don't make a mistake, okay? With our rivet holes here, these are for our billets, our tongue side. Down on this end, we've got marks for line 24s. Let's jump over to our pocket placement. Working from right to left, we've got a 4-inch by 8-inch pocket with a flap. Now this is going to be under the main flap of the briefcase. Going further left, we've got a 4 by 9-inch pocket, and we got a pick of that, so we know where that's going to land. Bottom right corner, we've got a 3/4 inch oblong for our keychain clip. All right, so easy enough there. Now, let's jump over to our decoration, because all told, this looks like it could be difficult. In fact, it actually isn't. We're simply going to parallel our cut line, and we're going to come in 2 inches. Easy enough. Let's do this though. Let's come back to just a simple piece of paper. Here's an easy way to do this. What I'm going to do is take a wider piece of paper, I'm going to lay it under my pattern, mark from my pattern, and simply trim, okay? We've got a 2-inch spread between our bottom flap and the center line for our decoration. So all I have to do is bring my paper in 2 inches, drop that down, and now I have my center line. Easy enough, okay? One more bit of help. With this big open curve here, that's going to be tough to draw by hand. Don't worry about it. Let's bring a bowl, simply a bowl from our kitchen. What I can do is draw that in, and I've got a perfect cut. Same over here. Drop that into my measurements, my marked measurements, 1.5 inch in. Therefore, I have a very consistent matching cut all the way across, and I didn't have to go to a lot of trouble to get that. All right, next pick. Let's do this. Let's jump over to our gusset. This is a relatively simple pattern. 12.5 inches long by 3 3/4 inch width. Then we're going to come down 3 inches, mark, and another 1.5 and mark. That's going to be for our billet, to where we can attach this to our gusset, okay? We're going to do this a little bit differently though. First off, 3/8 inch in either side to accommodate for our thickness and our bend. But also, we're going to overcut our length here, and here's why. Notice how clean that match is. It's spot on. The first time we make something, we're dealing with thicknesses of leather, or multiple thicknesses, multiple lengths, widths. We're never really sure, so what we're going to do is we're going to overcut this and simply trim to size. Going to make the whole thing so much easier. So we've done our pockets, gusset, and main body. Now let's step over to our billets. On our left side, we've seen these. We've got our tongue strap and our buckle strap for our closure. And on our right side, easy enough, we've got our billet to go on our gusset. We've got round end punches, an oblong, and an English point. So those are easy enough. Let's step over to our trunk handle and our shoulder straps. Top left, shoulder straps, 1.5 inch wide. We're going to taper those down to 1 inch, but I typically go 40 inch for my tongue side and then 17 for my buckle side. Entirely up to you there. And on our trunk handle, we've done one of these on our leather element. Easy enough. All right, so our patterns, they're ready to go. Let's jump over to our main table and cut some leather. And there we are. All right, lots of pieces, but this is going to be easy. We're going to line just about everything except our pockets. Now, what we'll do is we're going to mark the size, then overcut both our face and our liner. Therefore, one cut makes that edge look just like it was die cut. Secondly, this leather, is this not beautiful? This is our Pioneer Chrome Oil Tan. Love it. Easy to mark, easy to work. Also, you'll notice my pattern's a little bit different here. We can certainly mark through our plastic sheeting by simply pressing it. But I tend to like to punch a round hole in these, so therefore if I want to mark with pen or marker or an awl, I can do that. So I've done that with all my marks. All right, let's do this. Let's start and mark out our outside dimensions for our main panel. And there we go. Okay, let's take a look. Very nice. Easy to see, easy to mark. I love this. I love a black briefcase, but wow, was that difficult. All right, let's do this. Now that we've got our outside lines, let's mark all of our internal lines. And our last marks, there we go. Okay, now the camera's probably not going to be able to pick that up, but I can see those clearly. Now, funny thing, we've got 38.5 inches of length here. We need 40 here, so let's do this. We want to overcut here. So let's bring this out about 1/2 inch. Doesn't have to be specific. Let's make a mark. Same thing down here. Come out about 1/2 inch. There we go. Now let's take our straight edge and cut that line. So therefore we have a good straight edge for this pattern. And there we go. Okay, that gives us ample room there. So therefore let's do this. Let's cut 1/2 inch all the way around our main body. There we go, we've got the main body cut out, so let's do this. Let's roll that up, set that aside. Now, I'm going to pull this down, and from this piece, I'm going to cut a strap 3.5 inches wide, and I'll explain that. And there we are. Okay, the point here is that we need two 1.5 inch straps. So therefore, side by side, that's 3 inches. That gives us a little room overlay. That's exactly what we want. So when we trim that, again, no air bubbles, no misses. Also, we can knock out those 3 patterns with that. Let's roll this up, set this aside. I'm going to reposition my leather so we can cut our handle and our gussets. Okay, last 2 pieces of our pattern. Let's do this. Scoot this down a little bit. There we go. Now, again, we want about 1/2 inch all the way around, but we're going to make it a little bit easier. Let's take our gusset, pull that in about 1/2 inch, and then mark. And mark our holes. Okay, let's just scoot that over, butt that line right up against that, because when this is glued, this will just be one easy piece to work with. And last, let's drop our handle down in here, butt that up. All right, so let's do this. Let's just trim 1/2 inch outside on these 3 sides. There we go. Okay, now notice too, I've cut that freehand, because all of this, we're simply going to trim that off. Doesn't need to be a pretty edge. So we're marked there, looks good. Let's pull out our brown suede, cut our liner. And there we go, beautiful chocolate suede. Is that not a beautiful color combination? We have a problem though. So let's lay out our strapping. Let's lay out our main body. Notice we do not now have enough room here to cut our gussets and our strap, our handle. That's no issue. What I'm going to do is I'm going to back up. I'm going to bust this into 3 pieces. Won't be an issue. Straight lines. We can trim that. Then we can work this in, and we can absolutely get everything out of 1 piece of suede. And all 3 pieces cut, we're absolutely going to get this out of 1 piece of suede. So let's lay out our body. Now with this, we don't have to overcut. We've already done that, so I'm going to cut right to size. So let's get that right to our edge. There we go. Let's lay out our strapping, ample length there. Very good. Drop in a gusset right there. Gusset right there, and we have ample room. In fact, no problem, we've got a little bit extra. So I'm going to cut out these pieces, then we'll jump over, cut out our 2 pockets. And we are cut. All right, one more piece we need. This is for the clip for our keychains. This is just 3/4 inch by 4 inch, and what we'll do is we'll just punch and trim to size once we lay that in, so no guesswork there. One more point though. You'll notice I'm cutting straight on my board here. For larger projects, thinner leather, couple of cuts, not really an issue, but now that we're going to start cutting to size, I'll pull our poundo board back out. But before we do that, let's jump back over to our top grain. We're going to cut our pouches, which are not lined. All right, we've got a good scrap from our original hide, being very efficient here, using this up. Let's do this. Let's jump over, quick peek at our patterns. So we simply have a 4x8 inch. We're going to add a flap here. 4x9 inch, that's our back pocket. We've seen that. But we're going to do something a little bit different with our flap. So let's do this. Let's scribe and cut our 2 pockets out. Easy cuts there, cutting straight to size. Now, for our pouch, let's do this. Or for our flap, let's do this. Let's jump back over to our hide. What we want to do is look for a nice natural edge on here that's going to be somewhat easy to cut around. In fact, there's a piece right here. So what I'm going to do is drop my flap pattern right down on it. I want to make sure I leave enough room for my spot or for my snaps. So let's draw this in and cut this out. That looks good. That's going to be a cool flap. Nice natural edge on that. All right, we are ready to add some glue. Let's glue in our liners and we are moving forward. There's both of our main body pieces, liner and face. Your first thought, we've got a little brush in our barge here. It's going to take forever to get glue on this. No, in fact, you'll see, we're going to take less than 5 minutes to apply glue to both pieces. We're going to use a roller brush and an inexpensive paint tray, okay? Barge, love it, but we're going to need some good ventilation here. I've got a good cross draft in here, won't even smell the glue. Last point, we're on some paper here to protect my work surface, but the point is, when I'm rolling this across, I want to get as close to my edge as I can because I don't want air pockets or misses along here. I can get a little glue onto my paper. The problem is I don't want to get glue on my paper and then slide my face across. I'm going to get glue on my top grain. Most likely will not come off. It's going to leave a spot. So let's do this. Let's start right here. Going to get my brush loaded with some good glue. And now, look at that. No kidding, we're going to be able to apply glue to this piece in probably 2.5 minutes, 2.5 minutes on the other. So I'm going to apply glue to both pieces. And there we go. In fact, I think that actually took about 2 minutes. Couple points. First off, again, we've got a 1/2 inch over here. I can come back in with my brush and simply fill that in to avoid air pockets. But the second big point here, we're using a contact cement. So what's going to happen is when we glue these 2 pieces together, they literally are going to react and feel as one piece, all right? So let's move this aside. Since I've got no glue on my paper, I'm simply going to slide my suede over. If I do have some glue, just flip it over. And just almost right to the edge there, very good. One bit of help here is our leather's got a little weight to it. So therefore, I can pretty much run off the edge without hitting my paper. Got just a little bit of glue there, no issue, okay? Need to give these both about 5, maybe 10 minutes of dry time. We're gonna get it to where it looks dry, but it's tacky. Then we're gonna lay these together. With big panels, that's a bit of a trick. So we'll do that, then we'll move on and glue everything else. Okay, we are dry on both sides. Laying in panels, not such a big issue. But when we get up to here, well, it certainly can be. So what I'm going to do, my suede is a little more supple. I've got some good body in my face leather here. So let's drop that in first. Got a little room for error, but not much. We can certainly cut more overcut, but at some point we're simply wasting leather. Let's jump over to this. This is one of our rollers and I love this. This thing is heavy. Now, I want to be careful. Let's don't ding our leather with a corner. But what I want to do is I want to hit my edges, particularly along our long edges. Therefore, when we trim this, no pockets. Got my edges done. Now let's just run back and forth across our main body and down to our end. That looks great. Now again, this literally is going to react as one piece of leather now. Okay, I'm going to glue our straps and our billets in the same manner, and then we are moving on to our next step. And there we go, fantastic. That's our last strap to be lined. All right, let's cut to size. Okay, with our biggest panel, it's a big piece to cut. Now, our tendency is to cut on this side. I can lay my straight edge down, I can see my line easily. The problem is if I'm cutting and I make a mistake, I'm going to cut right into my work. Let's do this. Let's pull this across. We're going to have to reach a little bit, but that doesn't matter. Let's drop our straight edge in right on our scribe line. Nice and easy to see. New blade every time, and let's cut our first line. And there we go. Okay, let's look at this because we've done some work to get here. Look at that edge. Is that not clean and tight? We overcut. Therefore, we make one cut, looks just like a die press. All right, I'm going to cut my square throat, the other side, and then we'll cut our flap. And our last cut. Very good. So what I can do is right here, I can use my straight edge to square along the long edge, so therefore both points are going to be very consistent. Also too, I freehand this, but we can always take our bowl. We made our pattern from this, so we can drop that in, press very hard, and actually use that as a cutting guide. But thus far, this looks great. All right, I'm going to knock out our two gussets. Those are basically straight edges. But then we're going to jump over to our straps because we need to taper those. Gussets cut and ready to punch. Let's set those aside. Now when we bring out our strap, this looks like it could be difficult to get a good clean cut. No, not at all. In fact, let's do this. First off, let's turn our strap over because right here I've got a little extra suede showing. Therefore, I know I'm going to have no misses when I cut. I'll have a cut on top grain and liner. Now, to cut a 1.5 inch strap, all I've got here is a 1.5 inch piece of bar stock from any hardware store. Makes the whole process much easier. So let's do this. Let's lay this in. There we are. Now let's just cut a good straight edge across here. All right, so we've got a good clean straight line there. Let's flip this around. Now let's butt this against our straight edge and then lay in our 1.5 inch strap. So therefore we know we're square. And let's cut this. There we go. Let's trim that off. Now we've got a 1.5 inch strap there, so let's bring this over and do the same thing again. There we go. We've got plenty of length. Now, on our length for these, for our main strap, we're going to need a cut at 40 inches. 40, good. And for our second, for our buckle side, we're going to need to cut at 17. Let's set this piece aside because we'll use that shortly. Now, on our 40 inch side, let's take our pattern, take our awl, and on our tongue end, let's drop that, butt that right to the end, and with our awl, let's mark our size holes. There we go. Okay, let's scoot to the other end, butt to our other end. Now we're going to mark both for our holes, for our rivet holes, but also, now that we're going to taper, let's put a small mark at the start of our taper and at the end of our taper, both sides. There we go. Okay, same thing for our 17. And then again, let's mark for our taper, start and end. There we go. And you'll see where that comes into play here very shortly. All right, so those are ready to go. Let's set those aside, and we're going to pull out There we are. Lost it for a second, but now we've got our handle. Let's trim this to size. And we're marked there. Okay, let's do this. Everything is 1 inch. We're going to have 4 tapers here, both end of our handle and one end on each strap. So with this, we've got a 1 inch arm on our straight edge. So let's lay that in. I can see my marks, my starting marks. So we're going to cut from here out. This will make sense very shortly. All right, there we go. Let's do that on the other end. Same thing, and then I'm going to do the same thing again on the end of both of our straps. And there's our last cut on our longest shoulder strap. Very good. So basically that's what we have. That's what we're looking for. All right, let's jump over to our quartz and punch in punches in these to complete our taper. So let's start with our handle. We've got our 2 cuts here. Now a little bit wider. So I'm going to jump up to an English point, 1.5 inch. I can certainly use a round end, but that makes a little point there that's going to catch. So let's do this. I'm going to split that open. I'm going to put the corner of my tool right in the end of my cut. I'm going to move that up, find my mark. There we go. How easy is that for a taper? Okay, let's do it on the other side. Same thing. And there we are. So if that sticks a little bit, we can trim that off. But thus far, clean taper. I'm going to do the same thing on the other end. All right, that looks good. Very cool. Let's set that aside. Now I'm going to do the same thing on the end of both straps. But this is a 1.5 inch wide. So let's jump back down to a 1 inch English point. Now, you can absolutely cut these by hand. It isn't an issue and it'll look great. But since we've got the tool, let's use the tool. Very nice. Now, we're coming down to 1 inch on everything. So let's do this. Let's check that. Look at that fit. Couldn't be better, okay? So now, what we've got is our end punches. We don't necessarily need to cut this. It's going to bend back on our back. We'll never see it. But let's do this. Again, we've got a 1 inch round. Let's go ahead and drop in that. So that makes that look very professional. There we go. Yank that off. I can trim that if I need to, but good. That looks professional. So I'm going to do that on the end. One end here on my longer strap, both ends on my handle. There we go. Okay, so that looks good. Now, while we're here, let's go ahead and punch in our holes. Now, for our connections, we're going to use a Chicago screw. So on our tapers, let's jump up to about a 3/16 or 1/4 inch, just somewhere in there. And I'm going to punch my 4 marked holes on my strap and then 4 on the end of each shoulder strap. All right, there we go. Now on this end, I've got this marked. Again, 3/16 or 1/4 inch is going to be a good size for our buckle tine. And one more, 1.5 inch strap. So let's jump back over to our 1.5 inch end punch. There we go. All right, well that strap, that looks good, very professional. Let's set that aside because now for our bend back, we're going to jump down to a smaller hole, about a 1/8 inch. So let's punch our 4 holes here, 1/8. Okay, so we've got our rivet holes. Now, again, we don't have to, but let's take a 1.5 inch round in and drop that on our bend back. It's going to make that very professional, all right? Last thing we need here is a 1.5 inch oblong, which 1.5 inch straps, 1.5 oblong. But I like to go a little bit longer, so let's go with a 1 3/4 inch. There we go. Okay, so that is ready to groove. In fact, all 3 pieces are. Let's step back to our main cutting table and cut our billets. For our billets, we've got 3/4 inch. The leftover from our 17 is 1.5 inch. So we're simply going to bust this down the center. Now we can cut this, but we're going to use a wooden strap cutter. Now we can't always use this on chromes. Not enough body. But in this situation, we've got some body on our top grain and we've got a liner. New blade is going to work nicely. So let's do this. We need an 8, 4.5, so that's 12.5 inches. Let's cut right there and take our strap cutter. And there we go. Look at that, 2 perfect 3/4 inch. Let's drop these down to 8" and 4½. Those are ready to go. All right, let's jump over to our billet for our gusset. We're at 5 inches long by 1 inch. So let's reset. All right, and let's cut that down to 2 at 5 inches. All right, so those are ready to go. Let's jump back over to our punch table, get those ready to groove. But also this piece, let's save this because we're going to use this as well. With our billets that are going to go on our gussets, we're going to use Chicago screws. So let's jump back up to our 3/16 inch punch, and we've got 3 holes to punch here. All right, those are ready. Now let's jump over to our 1 inch round end, put that on both ends. So those are ready to go. Let's set those aside. Now jumping over to our buckle billets. These are going to be a little bit different. We're going to drop in an oblong and we're going to rivet these closed. But what we want a quick release. Line 24 snap down here. So let's jump up to our 3/16. There we go. Now we can do our other 2 rivet holes simply with our 1/8 inch. And there we go. Okay. Now for our oblong, 3/4 inch, we typically want a 3/4 inch oblong, but I'm going to bump that up to a 1 inch. Easy enough. Now on this end, it looks like we've got a little extra room. We do. That's because we want a tab on the outside of our round or our line 24. So let's take our round end. All right, there we are. Okay, so those are ready to go. We can always do a round in there, but it's not necessary. Again, it's a bend back. Okay, let's jump over to our billets. Now, we're using a smaller buckle, so let's simply use a 1/8 inch for our size holes, but also, we're going to rivet this onto our face, so 1/8 inch here as well. Now, with our 2 holes together here, this is going to be our end. We will definitely see this. So let's drop in a round end on this end on both. There we go. Now on the other end, we want to use a 3/4 inch English point. That's going to go through our buckle. Let's step back over to our main table so we can punch our holes in our main body, our gussets, and our pocket flap. With our gussets, we're going to connect our billets onto this with just Chicago screws, nothing else on this. So let's jump back up to a 3/16. We're going to punch our 4 holes. Easy enough. Okay, let's set those aside. Those are ready to groove. Jump over to our pocket flap. Now we've just got 2 holes here, again for a line 24, so 3/16. All right, that's easy enough. Now we're going to jump over to the complicated portion of our show here. So right here, we're going to drop in our clip right on our center. So therefore, we need a 3/4 inch. 3/4 inch clip, same here. So we're going to our middle hole. There we go, clean and straight. Now, these 2 holes are going to be rivet holes. So let's just drop those in. All right, that's really all the holes we have until we get down to our face. Now we're going to have to be very careful here because we've got spots where we simply mark for a spot, and then we've got our holes for our basket weave. So let's start right here with these 4 holes. These are rivet holes because we're going to drop, there we go, we're going to drop our billets right there. Okay, now let's be very careful, and we need to watch our pattern here. In fact, we can lay that right there because my end hole, that's a mark for a spot. So I'm simply going to work the parallel line over to that second spot mark. Now I'm going to do the same thing across, but again I need to stop because I have a mark here for a spot. And our last 3 holes, very nice. All right, that looks good. Perfectly consistent, it isn't. But that's going to look good once that's laid. Now you notice too, we're not dropping in our holes for our handle. We're going to do that last, so it's a perfect squared handle. All right, we are ready to add groove lines to everything. So I'm going to move this out of the way. Let's groove. with our gussets, we're simply going to groove 3 sides. We're going to leave the top ungrooved because we're going to trim the sides there. Now with our groover, biggest point here, let's set our groover at 1/8 of an inch and leave it there. Because if I groove this edge, chisel, groove this edge, chisel, when I draw those together, it's going to be a perfect meet. And there we are. Okay, so those are grooved. Now, let's jump over to our billets. One point on these, we can certainly go around our end, but it's a little difficult to keep that consistent. And I'd rather just see a straight line, no groove, than a bad one. All right, so let's just start right here. All we're going to do is our long edges. There we go. So even though we're not necessarily sewing that, that makes a very finished edge. Let's set those aside. Those are ready to assemble. Now let's jump over to our pouch or our pockets. On my flap, I'm simply going to groove both sides, but over here, all 4 sides. And there's our last side there. Okay, pockets ready to go in. Now let's jump over to our main straps. I'm going to do all 3 straps the same way we've done, but now that we've got a longer round end here, or a wider round end, let's go ahead and go around that with our groover. Down to our end, let's circle around that, come back to the edge of our taper. All right, there we go. So our straps are grooved. Let's set those aside. Now I'm going to reset here, and we're going to groove our main body. And there we are, down to our last corner. All right, that looks good. Everything, I believe, is grooved. Now let's set up our quartz because we're going to start to chisel and sew. Let's start right here with our short strap. Now, we want to sew for 3 reasons. First off, strength, primary. Secondly, we've got 2-ply, but third, look at that beautiful stitch line. Really ties in well with our liner. So we're going to use a flat chisel, 1/8 inch. We've got a whole video just on hand sewing, so we'll do a bit of a crash course here. Now, I'm not going to sew around my ends. No real point here, we can. But let's do this. Let's drop our first tine right in our corner there and put the rest of our chisel right in our groove line. There we go. I've gone through. Clean and straight. Now, second step, first tine, last hole, keeping that in our groove line. There we go. Pull that out. Went through nicely. There we go. Looks good. All right, I'm going to go down one side and back the other. And there we go. Okay, so that wasn't bad. Just about 2 minutes. Let's step over to our larger strap or longer strap, do exactly the same thing. And there we are. All right, let's do 1 chisel hole right at the tip. There we go. That way we can sew in either direction from our tip. But all told, just about maybe 13, 14 minutes to chisel both straps. So that's not bad. Let's jump over to our main table and attach our pockets, get those ready to sew. So laying in our pockets, and I apologize because the camera just is not going to pick up my marks. I can see them easily. But let's start right here, the pouch without a pocket, simply going on the back. So we're going to lay that in right there. But before we do that, let's add some glue to 3 sides. Now, the rule of thumb is if we're going to tack to sew, let's just use a white glue. But if we're going to tack for permanent, contact cement. So let's add our white glue to 3 sides. And there we go. Okay, let's just get that a little more consistent with our finger. Maybe push it in a little bit so we don't have any coming out from underneath our pouch. Our marks, right here, 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 and here. This is up. Notice towards our flap is up. So let's lay this in. I'm going to drop that in right on my marks. That looks good. Clean and square, okay? When we jump down to our other end, we're ready to glue this in, but what we need to do is add our line 24 snaps. So I'm going to punch 2 holes here. Let's jump over to our quartz and add our snaps. We've set our line 24s before, but we're going to use our pewter line 24s. Going to go beautifully with our antique nickel hardware. So on the main pocket here, let's drop in our base. There we go, and set these. Nice, that looks good thus far. Now let's jump over to our flap, and we're going to set the cap side with our anvil. So look how even that rolled down in there. That's just what we're looking for. Back over to our table. Let's glue these in. Same thing again, we're going to add glue to our 3 sides, everything except the throat of the pocket. And there we are. Okay, so this is our throat, so the top. So let's lay this in right to our marks. There we go, clean and even, just what we want. With our flap, we're going to do this a little bit differently. We're going to add glue to our top grain, so lay this in right there and glue that down. There we go. Okay, next step. Let's step back over to our chisels, drop in our chisel lines, and drop in our clip. Going to be easy to chisel this. First off, let's do our flap. Now, it's a little bit tough to groove on the back side of our leather, on our flesh side. So let's lay in a square, and let's just scribe in a line across there. There we go. That'll keep our chisel line clean and straight. Let's just work from left to right on that line. And our last hit, look at that. Perfect. Very cool. Going to be easy to sew. For our pocket, let's start here because we're simply going to sew around 3 sides. But let's take our single tine right in our corner. Let's just put in 1 angle tine. Now let's work from that. But what I want to do to make sure this stays consistent, I'm going to lay my chisel, my 2-prong in there. There we go. Okay, now I know exactly where my next tine's going to be, so that's going to be a nice consistent corner. And there we go, our last 2 there. Okay, now let's work our way across the center. Work that out. There we go. Now, right in our center, I'm going to take a 4 tine. Look at that. Perfectly consistent from both sides. Now, I could have chewed up or spread out a little bit if I needed to, but that hit spot on. All right, let's jump over to our other pocket. But here, let's make sure. Because it's an easy place to get confused. Here's our top, because that's towards our face or our front panel. So let's start here. I'm going to put my 2 angle tines here. Work up and across. And our last time. Okay, that looks good. If I can get that out of there. Very clean and straight. Very consistent. That's what we're looking for. Let's roll that aside. We're going to set our rivet for our clip. Let's push that aside. Now we've got our little 4 by 1 inch by 3/4 inch piece. Let's drop in a rivet. We're going to use a medium rivet or a 5/16 because we're going through 3 pieces of leather. Let's drop that in our hole. And let's set this. Nice. Now let's come through our oblong, through our clip, and back through our oblong. Now with this, I tend to put my clip hanging out because that way I can simply snap my keys on that. Up to you. You can go either direction on that. And there we go. Okay, nice and tight. Now, let's get our board back out. Let's put our leather under it. Save us some noise. There we go. All right, that's good and secure. Good and tight. So let's square that as best we can. Let's take our punch. There we go. We've got through that. Move this yet again. And one last rivet. Very good. All right, let's just take some scissors and clip off our end. Very nice. Now, let's step over. Everything here is done except chisel and our decoration. So let's flip this around and get set up to do our Spanish basket weave. All right, for our Spanish or Mexican basket weave, we've got a leather element, shows us exactly how to do that piece by piece. But right here, 2 quick points. We're going to use our deer lace, and I absolutely love this. It's a pleasure to work with. But secondly, we're going to let tails hang down, very rustic. So therefore, we're going to work away from our buckle tongues. So I'm going to start right here and work my way across. All right, that looks fantastic. Now, Let's trim that off. Very good. All right, so that was just about 8 minutes to do one. Let's do one more thing before we're finished. Let's take our mallet and just set that. Lightly hammer that across. Oh, there we go. Well, that looks fantastic. All right, so really just about a half an hour to do all 4 sets. Is it worth it? Well, I think so. All right, I'm going to work my way across. In fact, again, starting from my billet, working in, starting from the billet, working out. All right, there we go. Now let's tap these down. There we go. That just looks fantastic. Very happy with that. Now, once we're done with the video, I may even put another line above that. That would look good, but also, at the same time, we can always drop this in on our gusset as well. Makes a nice decoration there. All right, let's step over to our main table and drop in 7 spots. Now, setting spots, we go through this in the majority of our videos, but let's just take a quick peek because there are 5 easy steps, all right? Again, I apologize, we're not going to see our marks, but I've got our mark from our pattern right there. I'm going to take my spot, I'm going to straddle that mark with my tines and press those in, all right? So I know where my tines go. I'm going to take a little cardboard pallet and with one of our craft knives, great knife, I'm simply going to push through. There we go. Now, I don't want more hole than tine, but what I can do is simply push that through. Look at that, sits very nicely. Now, let's grab a mallet, which is not close, should be. Let's give that a tap or two. Clean and flush, just what I want. All right, let's be careful here because we're going to have to flip our project over. Don't want to mess up our face. Let's take the end of our craft knife. I've got my 2 tines right here sticking up. Let's bend those inward. So let's bring this back over. We're going to drop our pallet on top on our quartz. Give that 2 good pops because now I can't feel those tines. They've sunk in nicely. I'm going to do that again at the end of each and then one right in the center. There we go. Looks great, and on the back I cannot even feel my tines. So those are not going to snag or catch on anything. But one thing, I want to back up. I said about 12 times our length here. Really, with our deer lace, that's going to stretch a bit. So maybe 10 times, that'll save us from wasting a little bit of lace. All right, next thing we're going to do, let's sew in both of our pockets. Now, with a project this big, pony, sewing horse, not going to work for us. Here's an easy answer to that. I've got a clip on some suede hooked to my ceiling. Now, I've got a slip knot in this, so it's easy to raise and lower the suede. Works a great knot, all right? What we can do is pull up our project, clip that right there, and look at that. My sewing is now right in front of me. It's going to be super easy, all right? Not going to kid you. We've got a lot of sewing to do here. But again, is it worth it? It absolutely is, all right? So we're going to sew our first pocket. Now, we've got a whole video on hand sewing, so I'm not going to go into great detail here, but 3 quick points. John James needles. These are so strong, we're going to sew the entire briefcase, same 2 needles. Secondly, Ritza Tiger Thread. And third, we're going to go about 3 times our length, maybe 3.5, give us a little extra room. So let's do this. We're going to start right in our top right or left, matters not, because we're going to hide our knot down in here. So we're going to sew all the way around back to here and hide our knot. All right, coming over to our last hole. Well, doesn't that look great? We're not going to let the lack of a machine keep us from making beautiful projects. All right, now that we've got 1 hole left, let's step over to our quartz because we're going to do 2 steps here. Now let's hide our knot. So what I'm going to do, I've got 1 hole left. So therefore I'm going to come to my next hole and I'm simply going to come through the 2 back plies. There we are. Okay. So let's bring that through on the inside. We're not going through our top ply. All right, so that's there. Now let's take our front piece of thread. And I'm going to go through that same hole, but now I'm just going through the 1 ply. All right, let's pull that down. Now, square knot. So let's pull that good and tight. Now with this, I'm going to go right over left, left over right. Draw that down. All right, we have a hidden stitch. So what I want to do, I'm going to cut my lace or my thread, but I don't want to cut down. what I'm simply going to do is lay my knife down, draw my lace across that. Look at that, not totally hidden. Now, one more step. We're going to hammer down our stitch line. And you'll see the difference. All right, there we go. We've got half done. So notice now my stitch line. It's laid down in my groove line. I've closed those holes down, and it looks very consistent. And there we go. All right, so one pocket done. And I think that probably took about 20 minutes to sew. Boy, doesn't that look good. I'm going to do the same thing on the other pouch. But right here, I simply need to do the 3 sides. Easy enough. All right, there we go. That looks good. Just what we wanted. A nice flush pocket on the back. Now, I'm not sure if I forgot to do this, but what I've got now, to save us a little time, I've punched our 2 holes. Now, these will be the snaps for our billets. So let's drop in 2 line 24 bases here. All right, there we go. That looks very good. Very happy with this thus far. We're moving along. All right, so next step, let's chisel our gussets and our main body. For the majority of our project, if we're a little bit off, left, right, up, and down, it's not really going to be noticeable. But here, we've got to pay attention. The trick is, we don't want our briefcase to be a little kicked left or right. That will be absolutely noticeable. We're going to take care of it though. So we've got our gussets. Let's start down here on the bottom. And I'm simply going to work a line of chisel holes across, starting roughly a chisel hole in or an 1/8 inch in, give or take. And 2 in the end, just like the previous. All right, 4 sides to do, and let's pick this one first. Let's start right down here. Again, same thing. Coming in about a tine length, or roughly 1/8 of an inch. Sink that in our groove line. There we go. I keep checking just to make sure I've got tines through, because we're going through pretty thick leather here, or 2-ply. And coming up to our end, let's drop in 4 right there, 2 tines in pre-existing. And there we go. Okay, so we've got one side done. I'm going to do the other 3 sides, then we'll jump over to our main body. And there we go. Well, that just came out beautifully. Everything lined up nicely. Now, let's step over to our main table. We're going to put some chisel holes in our main body. Let's make some very simple marks right off the bat to our main body. Let's square that all the way around. In fact, we can just square them either side, because what I'm going to do is simply push this back right to our groove line, and I'm going to mark 3 of our bend lines. So there's a mark, and right here. I'm not going to mark my farthest. Let's do the same on the other side. There we go. We've got that mark. So let's pull out our quartz. Now, we can use our body or our pattern to look for our marks. And again, I apologize, marks probably not visible on the camera. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my gusset with my blue mark, got my blue tape right back here. I'm going to lay that in between the 2 marks. Now, this line and this line match up perfectly. Very nice. So let's take our chisel, and I'm simply going to parallel this line of holes. All right, there we go. Let's do the same on the other side. All right, there we go. Last 4 holes. Now, this is a critical measurement. Notice this piece, no tape, no tape. This is actually going to fit in right here, okay? The reason I say that is because our first mark is critical. What I like to do, we could measure this, but that throws us off a little bit. I'm going to bring my pattern right to my marks, right to my edge. This incoming line on the edge of my pattern, my first tine is going to straddle that mark. There we go. Okay, now from here, what I'm going to do is, since this piece is going to sew in here, I'm going to lay that next to it, and I'm going to parallel the holes on my main body with my gusset just like I did down here. All right, last chisel set in there. Looks great. Now, we're not going to add our billet here. If you've ever tried to sew around a piece of hardware, it's hard. Your thread keeps hanging up on it. But we're using Chicago screws, so we can attach that with a screwdriver. All right, let's step back over here and sew in our gussets because we are getting close to done. Back to our rig. Now I've just got some empty boxes here with some weight in them to give us a little stability. All right, what we want to do now is we're going to take a needle. Let's be careful here because it's easy to get sidetracked. What I'm going to do is look for my two separations. That's either side of my chisel line for my gusset. Let's take a needle, push that through on that end. Now I don't want to use a clip here because I want my thread to tell me where this is going to center and not a clip. So first needle, first hole, let's come through. There we are. Double check, make sure. Let's do our saddler stitch across here. All right, now that I've got a couple of stitches in, I can remove this needle because now this is lined up, ready to go. So let's finish this piece out. Coming down to the end, let's come through the back side. There we go. And then through our front side, and we will hide our knot right in there. Then I'll do the other side, hide our knot there, and the bottoms are sewn in. There we go. Gusset bottoms are in. Now, we're going to back up quickly. We don't necessarily have to sew around the front flap, but our brown thread, our liner, and our deerskin lace are really going to come together. So before we sew this together, while it's still flat, let's take our chisel line from the top of our gusset all the way around our face. Now, right here, this is visible. Everything up front is visible. So therefore, on our points, we're actually going to chisel out from here because that's exactly 1 inch. We're using an 1/8 inch tine, so therefore 5 stitches per inch. Just like we did on our pocket, I'm going to come in right where my incoming groove line intersects my flat line. I'm going to put an angled punch right there. Very nice. Same on the other side. Now with that, I'm simply going to fill in with 3 tines across here. It's going to be very consistent for us. Very good. Let's do the same thing on the other side. Very good. So that's going to be very clean and consistent where it's visible. Now, let's work our way across the center. But what we're going to do is start on each side, meet in the middle, so therefore, again, we're consistent. Now, as I approach my center, let's just eyeball this. I'm going to press that in lightly, again lightly. Look at that. That's going to match up beautifully. So let's continue through. And there we are. Very consistent, just what we're looking for. Let's start on either side and work our way down. There we go. So on the other side, we had a perfect meet. Coming in here, we're just a little bit long. So what I can do is I'm going to take my 4 and I'm going to drop that in between the 2. What's going to happen is I'm going to be a little bit long here and a little bit long here. But the reason we're working our way around here is this is almost on the back. So we're not going to see that at all. But in all honesty, it's going to be such a small difference. There we go, that we'll never see that. All right, let's jump back over, finish sewing our gussets. This is the toughest part because we cannot miss our first hole. In fact, it's very easy to do. So I'm going to take a needle, push that through. All right, that's my first hole on my body. Let's flip this around. With this, let's take our gusset and I'm going to forcibly push my corner down. Hard as I can. There we go. Now our thread's going to make that square for us, but for right now, let's just drop in a clip. I know where my needle is, so let's take our threaded needle. First hole, 1 needle. I'm going to come through that hole. Now it might help to open up our second hole with that needle so I can find it. There we are. All right, let's bring that through. Equalize our length out. Now we're simply sewing. Coming down to our end. So what's happening is we've got a little more gusset than face. We're going to use our face to judge our distance there so everything's even. What I'm going to do is come through the last hole on my face, second to last hole on my gusset, and then let's simply tie a square knot and hide that right down in here. Good and tight. There we go. And again, let's bring our thread across our blade. Very cool. We're going to hammer that down. That'll disappear. But boy, that looks good. So let's flip this around, and I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, sewing my gusset on the front side of the pouch first. There we are, second to the last hole. Let's go through our last 1-ply front, or 2 plies technically, but the front only. And then the back, let's tie a square knot right here. And draw that down in, and again, let's just draw across our blade. There we go, that keeps us from cutting anything. All right, let's trim these to size, then we'll sew the back side. To trim flat, what I'm going to do is simply press this down. I want to let some hang off my table so my bend is there, so I've got a good parallel cut there, and it looks like it. So let's use our knife, sharp blade every time. Now, use a straight edge if you want, but I'm simply going to freehand this. Well, look at that, perfect. So we trimmed to size, looks like it was die cut. Gonna do the other side. That looks good. So let's jump back over here and sew the back side of our gussets. And down to our end on the back side of our last gusset, let's tie a square knot here. All right, there we go. Let's do this. Let's move our clip out of our way, flip this around. Well, that looks fantastic thus far. Very cool. I'm gonna get us set up, and we're gonna sew the outside of our flap. When we're sewing our flap, we've got a long piece of thread here. Let's don't do that to ourselves. Let's start right in the middle and work our way out. We have a place to hide our knot. There'll be no knot in the center. Makes the whole thing very easy. But what we want to do, now, we don't have to have exactly the center hole. It's not going to matter. But what we do want to do is where we were pulling really tight on our gussets, let's go a little bit easier here, because if we simply pull this too tight, what's going to happen is it's going to bow on us, or our edge is going to curl under. So let's do this. Let's just sew like we normally would, but let's just add a little bit less tension. Easy sewing through here. In fact, this won't take any time at all. And coming down to our last hole on the flap. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to go to the last hole on the gusset. That's going to seal our line so we don't have a stitch missing. But what I want to do is I'm going to push down inside the main pocket. There we go. And on the back side, I'm going to come through the last hole on my gusset, and I'm going to push that down on the inside. And the second half of our square knot. So let's pull that in tight. There we go. So what that does is that traps that knot way up under here. Now I can simply trim that off and we'll never see it. All right, let's take a look at that flap. Well, that's looking very nice. Nice stitch line. See how it's bowing just a little bit? That's what I'm talking about. But really, once we hammer down our stitch line, that'll go away. So I'm going to jump over, sew the other half. So our knot is sunk down in there. That looks good, but let's do this. Let's don't forget to hammer down our stitch line. So we need to hammer down our gussets and our stitch along our flap. All right, let's do our gusset stitch first. Now we can certainly use a mallet here. Let's just be careful not to damage the briefcase, the leather, while we're hammering this down. And there we are. All right, that looks good. Boy, that flap, that stitch line, very nice. Let's get our handle knocked out. Now we've got a leather element on making a trunk handle, so we're just going to glide through this. So we're going to chisel both sides just to the end of our taper. Let's drop in our cording. With this, we simply need to secure our cording in. This is just 1/2 inch nylon rope. So let's just go right down the center. Good with that. Let's jump over, and again, we're just adding enough glue here to secure this in so it doesn't work its way out over time. And there we go. Let's give that just about 5 minutes to dry. There we go. Let's lay that in nice and even and straight. Good. Now let's step over here and sew this together. Saddler's stitch, let's start at either end, and we are really going to crank down on our stitch this time. because we want to bring this together good and tight. All right, coming down to our last hole, let's do the same as we've done in the past. We're just going to come through one side, come through the other side, and we'll tie a knot right there. It'll never be seen. There we go. Nice looking trunk handle. Very cool, very easy to do. Let's step over, knock out our last two billets, put buckles on those, then our body comes together. Before we do that, let's do this. We're going to use antique nickel hardware. So therefore our rivets, nice nickel polish, absolutely, in our Chicago screws. Floral cap, and I love these. But again, high polish. So I've got just a piece of wood that I can drop these in. Simply the caps, don't need to paint the screws. But let's drop those in. Let's take a little spray paint. Let's take a rag and simply polish those off. Very cool. Now we have nickel Chicago screws. Let's flip that around, because on our rivet, again, I've just got holes here in my block that will fit in. I'm just going to take a simple pad and I'm just going to sand that a little bit, just enough to get that high polish backed off. And there we go. Still nice clean look, but now a little more of a brush finish than a high polish finish. Let's take these over and knock our buckles and our billets. Multiple steps here, but all easy enough. We're going to use a heel bar buckle, so therefore we're going to need a keeper. That's about 3/8 of an inch wide and 3 inches long. So I'm going to take a rivet, going to come through the bottom to the top grain, take one of my snap anvils, bring that around, drop that on. Now we're basically setting a rivet in a hole. Well, really in this situation, that's not so bad. We're actually not going to see that rivet. That will be tucked under our bin back. There we go. Okay, so we've got a good clean keeper. Let's make another one. And there we go. Not too bad. We've got two easy little keepers. Next step, let's take our billets and we're going to set our caps for our line 24s. That's our quick release for our briefcase flap. So let's drop a cap in our anvil. There we go. And let's set both of these. Snaps look good. There we go. Now, let's take our rivets. We're going to use a medium or a 5/16 inch rivet with our polished cap. Let's take our buckle and load this in our billet. There we go. Going to take my rivet. Going to put this right on the edge so that I can let my loop hang off. But let's don't forget our keeper. Let's slide that in. There we go. Drop that down and set our rivet on both billets. That looks good, very professional. Now, let's step over. We're going to drop these on our main body, our buckle tongues, our gusset billets, and our body is complete. Easy step here. Going to take our medium rivets, or 5/16. Let's come through the back. See if I can find that hole. There we go. Let's drop our billet down. Now I've got 4 rivets here that I've polished the cap. Looks good. Let's scoot over, drop in the billets on our gussets. We're going to use Chicago screws here for 2 reasons. First off, ease. Really difficult to sew our gussets when we've got a billet here with an O-ring. Secondly, strength. Absolutely. So with our billets, notice I've got a longer spread here than I do here. That's for my O-ring. So I'm going to bring that around. I'm going to take a 3/8 inch Chicago screw, push that through. If I can find my hole, there we are. Now, let's add just a little dab of white glue to that. That's not going to seal it forever, but it's going to keep it from working out. I'm going to take a screw, and I'm going to go through our upper hole and screw this in. And screw that down in good and tight. There we go. Okay, second hole, easy enough. I'm going to take a 1/4 inch, add a small dab of glue to the inside of that, and I'm going to go through my bottom hole into the bottom hole on the main body. That looks good, extremely strong and secure. So I'm going to do that on the other side. And there we go with our bottom. Well, that looks good. Before we close this, let's do this. let's take some packing paper and stuff this. All right, so therefore that's going to fill out our briefcase. So down here, let's drop in our snaps. And let's close this. See what this looks like. There we go. How does that look? Fantastic. Super happy with this. All that's left to do here, we've got to attach our handle. Super easy to do. But let's do this. Let's jump over to our straps. We've got some sewing to do. Let's do our short strap. 17 inches each side. Just going to sew down one side, back the other. I'm going to use 3 times my length. Let's use that as a gauge. See where we come out. Now we're coming down to the end. In fact, you know what? 1 hole left. It's just about 8 minutes of sewing time. That's not bad. So on our last hole, let's come through the front side. Let's tie a good secure square knot on the back. Get that good and tight. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring each needle through from the other side of that knot. Now that's not going to last forever, but that's going to tuck those 2 little tails up in there easily, and therefore I'm not worried about that coming out. We could add a little glue, absolutely. So let's do this. We're going to trim that. Now, 3 times our length. I'm a little short. I might go 3.5 times my length. So right here, let's simply cut that flush. There we go. Now, we'll hammer that down. It'll look great. I'm going to flip this over, do the other side, but at the same time, boy, did it bow. Don't panic. When we sew the other side, it's going to come right back to straight. And we're down to our end. In fact, let's open that up. Yep, right back to straight. Very good. So right here, same thing. I'm going to come through from the front. All right, there we go. Very cool. We'll hammer down our stitch line. But right off the bat, that looks good. All right, let's jump over to our handle. We never know exactly where this is going to land before we complete this. So what I'm going to do is make a template. Easy enough. We've got an 8 3/4 inch spread between our holes on our pattern. So let's just make a simple template. I'm going to draw a center line and I'm going to drop my center holes 8 inches apart. So therefore, when we drop this in, it's going to bow for us. Make a very comfortable handle. So let's drop this right in our center. Now, this is for a briefcase a little bit thinner. It's no problem. I'm going to see if I can't get this parallel. There we go. And right across the top. That's going to assure me that my handle is straight on top. There we go. All right, let's punch some holes in this for Chicago screws. 3/16 inch punch for our Chicago screws. I've got 4 screws antiqued and ready to go. So let's punch these and drop those in. And tighten that last screw down. Let's don't forget our glue. Little dab of glue in each of our screws. But look at that. Spot on square, straight, right across the top of my briefcase. And very secure with our Chicago screws. Good handle. All right, let's jump over and sew that long strap. The one part of the briefcase that I just absolutely dread is our long strap, sewing this. But you know what? Is it worth it? Again, it absolutely is. Look at that beautiful strap. So what we're going to do is start right here in our first hole. I'm going to sew down one side, hide my knot on my bend back, do the same thing on the other side. So my advice here, sit down in front of the TV and sew this because it will be beautiful when we're done. All the way to the end, just about 35 minutes to cut that or to sew that. Same on the other side, but let's see how fast we can sew. All right, we're about halfway. So what we're going to do, my watch, I've got that set and ready to go. Coming up on the 1 minute mark. This is 2 inches across. So let's see how far we can sew in exactly 1 minute. And let's start right there. And we're coming up on 58, and that's it. We just sewed 2 inches in 1 minute. That's not bad. All right, let's finish this strap out. Last hole, very good. In all honesty, that was not bad. So let's drop our knot in. All right, let's do this. Let's step over. Last step. We're going to knock in a keeper, a buckle, some screws. We're done. But between here and there, I'm going to stop at the quartz and hammer down our stitch line. So we're going to have a heel bar again on our main strap. Keeper, this time we're at 5 inches long. So let's set one rivet there. That's ready to go. So let's take our strap, drop in our buckle just like we did on our billets, drop in our keeper. That strap is ready to go. So let's flip that around, pull this in. I've got 4 1/4" Chicago screws antiqued. So let's take a clip, gonna drop that on, add a little glue to our Chicago screws, drop our head from this side. And there we go. Well, that looks good. Very cool. All right, over here, same thing, but that's all we have to do on this strap. There we go. That side is done. Boy, that looks great. All right, let's connect these to our briefcase. We're done. Strap ready to go. Let's clip this on. You know what? Could not be happier with that. What a great project, great briefcase, but at the same time, super sturdy, great protection for our laptop, quick release, pockets exactly where we want them. Could not be happier with this project. Great project and a beautiful outcome. Solid, sturdy, and durable. Now, 2 big points. Took some time to make this. But on that point, if we carry this to work with us for 1 year, we're going to enjoy this 200 times the amount of time it took to make it. Very cool. Secondly, with me, I'll remember how long something took to make it right up to that first compliment. At that point, I don't care. And funny thing is, that compliment is going to coincide with the first day you carry this. Cool. Second big point, empty canvas. Make it your own. All kinds of possibilities here. I hope you've had a great time making this with me, because I certainly have myself. I hope every briefcase you make is beautiful. Good luck with your projects.